Hello and welcome back to Bicycle Legs and another edition of Studio Albums Ranked. Today I'm going to be looking at the studio catalogue of the wonderful, incredible, one-of-a-kind, late great David Bowie. Now, unlike my other videos, I'm not going to be doing his entire catalogue. David Bowie had 26 studio albums, plus the 2 albums that he did with Tin Machine. If I tried to tackle the whole catalogue, this would probably be an hour-long video, and I don't think we want that. So what I've done instead is I've come up with my top 10 David Bowie albums, and that's what I'm going to be looking at today. This top 10 list I actually did before I ever thought of doing a channel. It's something I did back in 2016, a few months after David Bowie passed away. And going back and looking at it, I was surprised to see that I still felt that those were my top 10 albums. The other thing I like about my top 10, and this wasn't by design, this is just how it happened to work out, is that although it's heavy with albums from the 70s, because that I don't think anybody can really argue that that was David Bowie's sort of prime period, there's an album from every decade of his career except the 60s in this top 10, and he only did 2 albums in the 60s, so yeah, I think it's a very varied list. I think you'll be interested to see what albums come in the top 10, and there probably some of them wouldn't be picks that you'll have, but you'll let me know in the comments, I'm sure. Anyway, let's get into it with my number 10 Bowie album from 1995. It's One Outside. This was his last full album collaboration with Brian Eno, coming back to that collaboration after the Berlin trilogy. And it's a concept album looking at the life of Nathan Adler. And yeah, it's a great album. It's quite experimental. He'd gone through, like in the 80s, he went through a very commercial phase, which I think he wasn't a big fan of. He did the Tin Machine albums. He did Black Tie, White Noise, which was his sort of reunion with Nile Rodgers, which is a very dancey sort of album. Then he went and did this. Oh, there was the Buddha of Suburbia soundtrack in between. This is such a wonderful album, though. I mean, the title track, Outside, The Heart's Filthy Lesson, what a great song. Hello Space Boy, sort of the continuing story of Major Tom there. I Have Not Been to Oxford Town, No Control, We Prick You, I'm Deranged, Strangers When We Meet, which that last song was originally on the Buddha of Suburbia soundtrack. So, wonderful, wonderful album, and I think worthy of being in my top 10. As is my number 9, 2003's Reality. And this was the second of Bowie's renewed collaboration with Tony Visconti, the legendary producer, which had started off with Heathen the year before. This is a more straightforward album, but it's a wonderful album. Great songs, and it also includes 2 wonderful cover versions that I particularly enjoy, which is his cover of Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers, Pablo Picasso, and then one of those really rare things where one of your favourite artists covers one of your other favourite artists, and that is Try Some, Buy Some, a cover of a relatively obscure George Harrison song from the Living in the Material World album. But there's so many other good songs on this album too. Nuclear Star, She'll Drive the Big Car, Looking for Water, Fall Dog Bombs the Moon, I always love that song, the title track Reality, and then the epic album closer, Bring Me the Disco King. So good. My number 8 is 1971's Hunky Dory. Now, I know some people are going to be dismayed that this is as low on my list as it is. I know that for some people this is their all-time favourite Bowie album, and I get that. I really do. I think this is the album where Bowie first really found himself, found his sound. It's a wonderful album. I just happen to love a few of these albums a bit more. But I do love this album a lot. I mean, it's anything that starts with Changes. What a great song. Oh You Pretty Things. 8-line poem, which kind of functions as a bit of a prelude to what might be my favourite David Bowie song of all time, Life on Mars. That song's incredible. And then on side 2 you get the 3 sort of songs that are about people or tributes to artists. You get Andy Warhol, wonderful song. Apparently Andy didn't like it much though, which really bummed Bowie out. Song for Bob Dylan, and then Queen Bitch, his tribute to the Velvet Underground. And I think Queen Bitch is a bit of a taster of what was to come with his next album, which would be Ziggy Stardust. Most of this album, even though this is one of his first collaborations with Mick Ronson, not a very guitar-heavy album at all. Lots of piano, wonderful piano playing from Rick Wakeman, and lots of strings. So a great, the Bowie Brothers to end it. What a wonderful song. So yeah, Hunky Dory. Number 7 from 1973 is Aladdin Sane, his follow-up to Ziggy Stardust. I believe that Bowie himself once described this album as Ziggy Stardust Goes to America. Opens with Watch That Man, goes into the wonderful, complex, jazzy title track. This album is definitely Bowie stretching his wings out after a relatively straightforward album with Ziggy Stardust, and I'll get to that because it's definitely in my list. He's definitely sort of stretching out the musical chops a bit more on this album. Drive-In Saturday, Panic in Detroit, Cracked Actor, Time is a great song. Has that wonderful line about falls wanking to the floor. It's like, okay, David. The Prettiest Star, Let's Spend the Night Together, wonderful cover of the Rolling Stones classic. Gene Genie, one of his all-time classic singles. And then finishes with Lady Grinning Soul. Really good album. I mean, these are all wonderful albums. They're my top 10 for a reason. Number 6 is another one that'll probably be quite a few people's number 1. And I get that too. And that is Heroes from 1977. The second of the so-called Berlin trilogy. Bowie and Eno and Visconti bring in a fellow by the name of Robert Fripp to add some, I believe it was described as hairy rock and roll guitar. I think that Fripp's other collaboration with Bowie has much hairier rock and roll guitar on it, but we'll get to that in a minute too. Still, this is a wonderful album, great songs on it. You've got Beauty and the Beast, Joe the Lion, the title track. I mean, just what an incredible song. Sons of the Silent Age, Blackout, V2 Schneider, their little tribute to Kraftwerk. Sense of Doubt and Moss Garden, getting into those atmospheric side 2 songs that he did on the previous album in the Berlin trilogy, another album that we will get to in this list. New Cologne, sorry, and The Secret Life of Arabia, wonderful little closing track with some vocals. Now my number 5 is just before the Berlin trilogy. That's 1976, Station to Station. A lot of people describe this as a transitional album, excuse me. And I can kind of get that. He's sort of moving away from the soul man persona that he had on the Young Americans album. He's moving towards the Berlin trilogy via a character named the Thin White Duke. There's only 6 songs on this album, and a lot of them are lengthy, especially the title track. Wonderful 6 songs though. I mean, the title track, Station to Station, has got to be a top 5 Bowie song for me. Golden Years, another classic single. Word on a Wing, beautiful song. TVC15, really fun. I love that song. Stay, it's really good. And then his cover of Johnny Mathis's Wild as the Wind to close it out. Wonderful album, and I think sometimes it gets overlooked a little bit because it is considered a transitional album. I think it's one of his all-time classics. That's why it's in my top 5. My number 4 album is the first album of the Berlin trilogy, and that is 1977's Low. I think it's the best of the Berlin trilogy. Your mileage may vary. This is very much where it sort of had, on side 1 you have the shorter, punchier songs, and then side 2 you have the longer, moody, mostly instrumental tracks. But wonderful. Speed of Life, which is actually an instrumental, but much more lively than the ones on side 2. Breaking Glass, What in the World, Sound and Vision, wonderful single. Always Crashing in the Same Car, Be My Wife, A New Career in a New Town, that's side 1. And then What a side 1. That's just one of his best side 1s, I think. And then side 2 you have the, as I say, the more moody, mostly instrumental pieces, Wazawa, Art Decade, Weeping Wall and Subterraneans. An absolutely fabulous album. Bowie reinventing himself once again. Wasn't he the master of that throughout his career? Now my top 3 are just the nearest and dearest albums to my heart in the Bowie catalogue. All for slightly different reasons, I think. And the number 3 album might surprise a lot of people that it's as high in my list as it is. But from the first minute I heard this album, I knew it was an all-time Bowie classic, and it's only improved in my estimations as the years have gone by. And that is 2016's Black Star, his swan song, his final album in his lifetime. He unfortunately died just 2 days after it came out. And yes, I'm lucky enough to own one of the clear vinyl copies of this. I pre-ordered it before Bowie died, and I was lucky enough to actually have my pre-order filled, because I know a lot of people had their pre-orders of the clear vinyl cancelled because just the demand went nuts for it. 7 songs on this album, again some quite lengthy ones, so sort of harking back to Station there. Now Bowie had been silent for 10 years as far as recording any new music or putting any new music out, until 2013's The Next Day, which is a really good album, but it's a fairly conventional album, at least by Bowie standards. This is anything but. Tony Visconti said that Bowie knew this was going to be his swan song. I believe he described it as his parting gift to the world. And what an artistic statement this album is. It's just incredible. It's complex. It's lyrically, even though Bowie would always sort of have his lyrics be a little bit cryptic, you can tell what he's talking about in a lot of these songs, and it's his impending death. And you know, that became all the clearer when he died a couple of days after this album came out. But every song on this album is incredible. The title track, Black Star, I remember when the video for that dropped a little bit before the album came out. Incredible, blew me away at the time, still blows me away. 'Tis a Pity She Was a Whore, great song. Lazarus, heartbreaking song. I couldn't listen to that or watch the video for months after Bowie died because it was just too raw. But it's just an incredible, wonderful, beautiful, heartbreaking song. Sue, or In a Season of Crime, Great. Girl Loves Me, I really, really like that one. You know, where the fuck did Monday go? And we all felt that. Dollar Days, wonderful song. And then I Can't Give It All Away to finish off. And that song really does feel like a farewell, especially in hindsight of what happened. I think this is an absolute stone cold Bowie masterpiece. And I will die on that hill. I think it's fabulous. My number 2 album is going to be a lot of people's number 1, and I get that. And that is 1972's The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. Or simply Ziggy Stardust, if you will. As I was saying earlier when I was talking about Hunky Dory, I think this is his most stripped down, in a lot of ways his simplest album. But it really works in the context of the concept. It's a concept album, and you can't argue with the results, because this is the album that broke David Bowie into being a genuine superstar. He'd had some notoriety and a couple of hit singles before this, but this is the album that absolutely broke him wide open. And how would it not? I mean, every song on this album is just incredible. 5 Years, what a great opener. Soul Love, Moon Age Daydream, great song. Starman, I mean, almost his theme song in some ways, isn't it? His cover of It Ain't Easy, really, really good. Great closer to side 1. And then side 2, Lady Stardust, beautiful. Star, great rocking song, that one. He really gets into the rock and roll on side 2. Hang On To Yourself is great. Ziggy Stardust, the title track. I mean, again, another Bowie classic, isn't it? And then Suffragette City, wham bam, thank you ma'am. Wonderful, wonderful rock and roll song. And he finishes it with Rock and Roll Suicide. A wonderful dramatic close to an incredible album. Just pipped by my number 1, and partly for musical reasons and partly for sentimental reasons, this is my number 1 Bowie album of all time, and it is 1980's Scary Monsters. Now, this is the first Bowie album I owned, so that's where the sentimental part, I think, comes in, partly. It's a wonderful album, though, and it really is. And the other thing, sentimental, but also one of the greatest musical gifts in my life. I had never heard of King Crimson at this stage in my life. This is the album that introduced me to the genius that is Robert Fripp. And his guitar playing is so wild and savage and avant-garde on this album. Nobody sounds like Robert Fripp when Robert Fripp is playing like this, especially. And Bowie uses him so well, so tastefully. Doesn't use him on every song, because some of the songs wouldn't suit that sort of guitar playing. And he understands that. That's another thing that makes Bowie a genius, is knowing when to use a brilliant player and also when not to. But the songs, It's No Game Part 1, ferocious opener. Up the Hill Backwards, Scary Monsters and Super Creeps, the title track, really, really good. Ashes to Ashes was the massive hit off this album. And I think that's the reason that some people sort of say this is a more commercial album. This was coming out of the Berlin trilogy. He's still working with Tony Visconti, but no longer with Brian Eno. I think there's still a lot of the experimentalism of the Berlin trilogy on this album. I don't think this is a particularly commercial album at all. It's a little bit more streamlined than the Berlin trilogy, and every song is a vocal song. There's no instrumentals, but I still think this is a very, very artistic album. Fashion, another big hit single for him. Unfortunately, on the single version, a lot of Fripp's mad guitar playing gets trimmed out for time. So I always say, listen to the album version of Fashion because it's the definitive version. It's got all that incredible nuts frippery on it. Teenage Wildlife, what a great song. A bit of a nod slash dig at the New Romantics, who I think Bowie felt were copying him a little bit. Scream Like a Baby, great song. Kingdom Come, his cover version of the Tom Verlaine song. Tom Verlaine, of course, was originally in television. He'd gone on to a solo career by this stage. Because You're Young, really great song. Guest spot on guitar by Pete Townsend on that song. And then the much quieter It's No Game Part 2 to bookend the album. I love that sort of bookending feeling. This is my favourite Bowie album. It's the one I will go back to more than any other album, even though I've been listening to it for, not quite 40 years. I didn't get it when it first came out. I was a little young for that, but I got it in the early 80s. I think I got it a bit before Let's Dance came out. So, yeah, maybe 82? No. Anyway, that is my David Bowie top 10. I'll go through it again. At number 1, Scary Monsters. At number 2, Ziggy Stardust. At number 3, Black Star. At number 4, Low. At number 5, Station to Station. At number 6, my beat up copy of Heroes. At number 7, Aladdin Sane. At number 8, Hunky Dory. At number 9, Reality. And at number 10, Outside. So please let me know in the comments what your favourite David Bowie albums are. Maybe you can give me your top 10. If you're feeling really brave, maybe you want to rank the entire catalogue. Or maybe you just want to tell me which ones of these are your favourites, which ones you're not so keen on. I love reading the comments. It really makes me happy when I see comments on new videos. Please like, share and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. When I started filming this video, I was tantalizingly close to 100 subscribers. I think it was on 99. So yeah, please like, share and subscribe. As I say, it really does help the channel out. If you're new to the channel, please go and have a look at some of my other videos. I think I've got plenty of other content there that you would enjoy. And again, that does really help the channel out if you go and view a couple more videos. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at bicyclelegs on both Twitter and Instagram. My Instagram account is mostly just me posting records that I happen to be listening to. Twitter, I talk about anything and everything. So yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you to David Bowie for your wonderful contributions throughout a 5-decade career. We all still miss you. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.